Alright, so now we're going to drape a bodice that is princess seam from shoulder. Okay, I'm going to start by, so we're going to have two panels. Okay, well, the panel that comes down center front, across the waist to the princess seam, up princess seam, cross shoulder, back neckline to center front. And the second panel will come down our princess seam, over the waist, from the waist to side seam, up side seam, around armhole, shoulder, back to princess seam. Okay, so our first panel, we're going to start by lining up our length grain, our salvage, with our center front on our form. I'm going to start right here by pinning center front neckline, and then I'll just pin down about every 3 or 4 inches. Make sure again your muslin is about 3 or 4 inches longer, because we have to go around our shoulder on the top and about the same at the bottom. There we go. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pin around my neckline up to shoulder. So pin every about 1 inch or so. And if you get pulling, go ahead and just clip down into the pin where the fabric is pulling so it lays nice and flat. Like so. And continue pinning up until you get your shoulder. Continue pinning up until you get to your intersection of neckline and shoulder, right there. Again, clip down so that you don't have any pulling. Like so. Alright, now I'm just going to come across my shoulder until I get to my princess seam. So I'll pin about 1 inch. And then right there, and now I'm at princess seam. Stop there. I'm going to come back to my center front and I'm going to start pinning out. I'm going to smooth my fabric out from center front to my princess seam like so. And I'll continue just doing that all the way down until I get to the waist. Make sure you get nice and smooth here at bust. If you need to add more pins in, you can. Around the tight curve under the bust, depending on your form, you might need a few more pins. So I'm going to pin about every inch here. If you need to put another pin at center front to keep your fabric from pulling, you can do that as well. And so here we have a tight curve underneath. I'm pinning about every inch. And I'm going to keep that smooth. I'm smoothing down and out, getting rid of any bubbles. And now I'm pinning again about every 3 inches or so until I get down to the waist. Alright, so now we've gone ahead and draped our first panel. I'm going to go ahead and remove some of this extra fabric, leaving about 2 inches or so from princess seam. And over. I don't need all this extra here at shoulder, so I can remove some of that. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and mark my waist. Just clip into this a little bit. There we go. Lays flatter. So mark waist from center front to princess seam. Right there. And I'm going to mark my bust line from center front to princess as well. I'm going to measure down a 1/2 inch from my neckline seam on my form at center front. Okay, I've measured down a 1/2 inch there. And at intersection of shoulder and neckline, right here, I'm going to blend down to that 1/2 inch mark, or blend up to that point, whatever is easiest for you. Okay, this will all get perfected later with a curved ruler. And then I'm going to mark down my shoulder seam until I get to my princess seam, which is right here, like so. And now I'm going to mark down my princess seam all the way down to my waistline, Just follow the edge, that seam right down. Like so. Okay. So we've draped the first panel of the princess seam. Now we want to go ahead and drape our side front panel. Okay. First thing I'm going to do is move all the pins at princess seam over for about a ½ inch and flip them. Like so. So that I can roll this princess seam, or roll this panel out of the way and drape my other panel. Like so. Okay. I already have another piece of muslin set up ready to go. You can see I have my length grain marked right down the center of this. This red line indicates length grain because I don't have a salvage on this. And I'm going to line up that length grain so it's parallel with the length grain on my form. And there it is. So I'm kind of matching up about right in the center of that princess, of this side panel. So here's side seam, here's princess line, okay? So this length grain, again, is running parallel to the grain on the body, to length grain. And I'm lining up about right in the middle of the form. And I'm just going to go ahead and pin this on. I'm going to pin right on that line I made. And I'm going to pin in both directions at each point. So there we go. I'll put a pin right up here to hold it in place for a minute. Here's my bust line. I pinned in there. So I'm going to smooth down, and I'm going to pin this nice and smooth right down to my waistline. I'm going to do it every about 2 inches or so. Keep that nice and smooth all the way down. Until you get the waistline, put your mat right here. And now I'm going to do the same thing up. Now you'll notice this is the front of the body, so it's straight, but it's also curving across the chest, which is okay. And I'll pin up the about shoulder area. I think one more will be fine right up here. That should be good. That should do it. Okay. Now, let's go over here, and what we're going to do is we're going to pin over to princess seam and just smooth that fabric out. And again, around the fullness of the bust, and where it's tight, we might need more pins. Hold that in place, and that's okay. A little bit of ease under the bust, or around the bust, I should say. There we go. And I'll come up this way as well, right on princess seam. Princess seam is running right here, all the way up, shoulder. Okay. Now I'm going to come up side seam. Okay. I'm going to smooth over. I have a lot of extra fabric here that's kind of pulling, so I'll remove some of that. Leaving about 2 inches or so. And if it's pulling too much, I can always go ahead and clip a little bit right up to waist, like so it lays smoother. And again, I'm just pinning across to side seam now and smoothing that out like so, all the way up to armhole. And now I'm going to come up here at shoulder, and I'll also start smoothing that out right along my shoulder. So shoulder line is right there, so princess and shoulders right there. And I'll pin that down right to armhole. Like so. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark some information here. Let's transfer on our waistline. All the way to side seam. There's my side seam. And my bust line as well. I'm going to mark shoulder. I'll find my princess seam where it starts, mark that. And then I'm going to go ahead and mark shoulder all the way down to my armhole. And then at armhole, I'm going to measure down an inch from the base of the arm plate. Measure down 1 inch. There. And again, about mid armhole, I'm going to blend. I'm going to follow this down and blend right down to this 1 inch mark. So, and then continue down and mark my side seam until I get to the waist. Okay. Alright, so now what we're going to do is join our side panel that we just draped to our front panel. So I'm going to move these pins here at my princess seam back just a little bit, make it easier for me to get in there and drape. Moving them out of the way. About an inch away from my princess seam. I'm actually going, oops. Okay, now I'm actually going to fold this back, and I'll go back to my front. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to join the two together, okay, right along the princess seam. So I can grab, and I'm going to follow the line that I already drew on my front. That's what I'll use as my guide. I've not drawn the one on the back yet. I'll do that after I've joined the two together. So I'm going to bring those two sides together, the front and the back. So there's my front, sorry, the front and the side. There's the side. I've pinned through both layers. And we're going to do that all the way up until I get to shoulder. Pin right through that line. I'm coming up the bust now. We'll pin around the fullness of the bust. You can always go back and again readjust pins if you need to. some pins here at shoulder. No. And we're almost all the way up the shoulder now. And there we go. Alright, so we've pinned through now both layers right at princess seam. There's my front panel, and then here's my side front panel. Let's go ahead and remove some of this extra fabric here at princess seam. Just cut it down to about 1 inch to 2 inches. If you get pulling here along the bust, you can clip in a little bit and alleviate that pulling. Now, on your front panel, remember this, when we take it off, is going to be a straighter line here. On this side, you have a curved, so there should be some ease in here, and that ease should be on the other side of the bust. It shouldn't be necessarily from shoulder down, you know, too far, or from here, because these are pretty straight lines. It's right in here around the bust that we have that ease, okay? Because the fabric is, again, evening around that curvature of the bust and then into that straighter seam, which is on the front, okay? Okay, so let's go ahead and mark the side princess seam now. Right where the pins are going through, we'll mark that up. All the way up the shoulder. Looks good. Check and see on the front if we need to readjust our lines at all. This looks pretty good right here around the bust. I just need to readjust a little bit. It's coming out a little bit more now it's pinned together. Make sure I mark off. Okay. And then about 2.5 inches up from my bust line, I'm just eyeing it. I'm going to go ahead and put a notch up here on both sides. Because again, I want to contain that fullness in here, that ease rather. That's why I run the fullness in here. And then about 2.5 to 3 inches below, I'm going to put another notch. Because again, that is where I want all that fullness or ease contained. Okay. Remember that this line here is our grain line on the side panel. Like that. And then we've done it. We've gone ahead and draped our front princess from shoulder bodice. Okay. For the back, it's the same exact thing. Okay. We would drape over from the back to princess, mark everything, and then for the side back, we'd mark our grain line, pin over towards princess, pin over towards side seam, and then join the two together. Okay. So same thing. It's just a little easier because we don't have the bust to go around in the back. Okay. So that is princess seam from armhole.